Hello and welcome back to Rule the Game. In today's video, I'll show you how to play Faraway by Johannes Goupy, Corentin, Lebrat, and Maxime Morin, published by Catch Up Games. This game is for 2 to 6 players, starts at age 10, and lasts about 25 minutes. As you can see, because of the 2 yellow lines, this is the yellow box, and when I bought it, there was also a red box, a green box, a blue box, but I understand that they're all exactly the same. So don't worry if you have the red box, you can still play, or you can still continue to watch this video and continue to play it the way I explained it to you. Also, please stay tuned until the end of the video where I show you some hints for your first game. Before we get started with the game, let me explain to you the kind of cards that you have here. There are 2 types of cards. One of them is called the region, one of them is called a sanctuary. On the regional cards, you always have a number up here that goes from 1 to 68. Each number only exists once. The number is surrounded by a circle that has either a sun or a moon on it. The sun or the moon might get important later for the scoring. A card can also have here a resource, like this crystal that is here. On the bottom, the regional cards usually also have something about scoring. In this case, what this means is that for each green card that you're going to have at the end of the game, you get 4 victory points. However, sometimes you also get here a condition. Only if you fulfill this condition will you be able to actually score. The condition in this case is that you have 2 pineapples. I call them pineapples. If you go look at the instructions, they will tell you they're thistles or something else. They look like pineapples, don't they? So I call them the pineapples. So this is what your regular regional card looks like. You also have the sanctuaries. Those are the smaller cards. They can have on the bottom a scoring ability. In this case, for yellow and for green cards, you get 1 victory point each. They can sometimes also have a color like this card. That's a red card that contains a resource, a pineapple. Or in some cases, you also get them here as a gray card again, but with the moon symbol. The game is set up really quickly. You'll take the regional cards, you shuffle them, you then hand out 3 cards to each player, and in the middle you put down as many cards as there are players plus 1. So for a 4-player game, you put out 5 cards. Then you shuffle the sanctuaries and you put them also face down right next to the other cards. Each player can then of course pick up their cards and look at them. And that's already it. You're ready to go. There is an advanced game though, where you can hand out each player 5 cards. They'll decide which 3 cards they want to keep, and they return the 2 cards that they don't want to keep. You then shuffle the rest of the cards with the discarded cards again before you place the pile face down and then put on these cards here. But that's the advanced method. For the first game, I don't recommend this. For the first game, just hand out 3 cards to each player. Before we get started with how to play the game, you need to know how it is scored, because that is essential to how you're going to play the game. At the end of the game, each player is going to have 8 regional cards in front of them, going from left to right, with left being the card they played first, right being the card they played last. Each player may or may not also have some of these sanctuaries in front of them. These cards are the ones that are in the middle, that we put out in the middle when we started the game. They're not necessary for the scoring. Before we start scoring, we now turn over the 7 cards to the left in the row of cards that each player has, so that only the card all the way to the right is open. We now score from the right to the left. First, we score card 1. This card gives you 5 victory points. It does not have a condition. It doesn't depend on whatever other cards you have. 5 points, you write that down here in line 1. Then we go to the second card. We flip the second card around over. As you can see, this card doesn't have any points that you can score, but it has a couple resources that you might be able to use later, but there's nothing to score. You write down a 0 here. Third card. Here we have a condition that you need to have 2 antlers. They're actually called chimeras in the game, but I call them antlers, and a pineapple. And as you can see, I have a pineapple here, but also the resources down here from the sanctuaries count. And I do have 2 antlers here. So I have 2 antlers and a pineapple. That together fulfills the condition, which means I'm going to get these 15 points. I'm going to write down 15 points here in line 3. Please note that there may well be more antlers or more pineapples down below these cards. However, it only counts whatever you can see. So whatever you have here on the face down cards, it doesn't really matter until they're turned around, and then you can count them. And that's how we continue. Card 4, card 5, card 6, card 7, card 8. Now you've filled up all these lines. And after we've scored the 8 lines, we go down here to this last line that shows the sanctuaries, where we go and check how often we fulfill these conditions in the sanctuaries, and you get the points accordingly. Whoever has the most points wins the game. In case of a tie, the person with the lowest number in one of their regional cards will win the game. Faraway is played in rounds. You'll play 8 rounds until you have 8 of these regional cards. As you can see here, we've already played 3 rounds. That's why we have 3 regional cards here. In each round, you'll do 4 actions. The first action that you will do is that you will take a card from your hand and place it face down in your row of regional cards that you already have. This is done simultaneously by all players at the same time. We then all flip around here our card so that we now have the 4th card in our row. And the second action is that you check if you have an increasing number from here to here, which in this case is a 53 going to a 67. And if you have an increasing number for the newest card, you can then pick up sanctuaries. You'll pick up 1 sanctuary for the increase in number, plus however many maps you have on your cards, on the regional cards and on the sanctuaries, those you will also add up. So in this case, we'll have 1 card for increasing, plus 1, 2, 3, a total of 4 sanctuaries that you'll pick up. You can look at them, but you first put them in front of you, face down. The third action is that now every player refills their hand by picking up a card from the middle. This is done in the order of the number that everybody has just placed down. Since I have a 67, I most likely have to wait until the very end until I can get a card, because first the player with the lowest number starts and the person with the highest number goes last. So let's say one player has played number 4, they'll take another card, then we have another person with a low number, then we have a third person with a low number, and now it's my turn. I have only 2 cards left. I'll pick one of them, I put it in my hand, and then the last card that's here goes on the discard pile. The fourth action is, if you have sanctuaries in your hand, you will look at them, play one of them next to your board here, and you discard all the others. And now we refill the board with 5 new cards. And we're going to move on to round 5. Of course, in the first round, you won't be able to get any sanctuaries because you haven't been able to increase your number yet. Likewise, in the 8th round, it won't make any sense for you to pick up cards anymore because there's no 9th round where you can actually use the card. So you'll skip these steps in the 1st and in the 8th round. So once you have your 8 cards and your bunch of sanctuaries, we then remove these cards. You also discard the cards that you had in your hand. And then you proceed with scoring, which I explained at the beginning of the video. And here are some hints for the first game. First thing that you will notice in this game is that every card that you play will not be dependent on what you've played before, but it will be dependent on what you play after. So when you play a card, forget about whatever you've played before. Only look at what do you need afterwards to fulfill the condition of that card. In this case, it doesn't have a condition. But let's say in this case, if you've played that card, now from this moment on, you're going to have somehow 2 crystals and 2 antlers coming in these other cards that come afterwards, or in the sanctuaries. There are plenty of sanctuaries that also give you victory points at the end, and you feel like you should get these cards with the victory points, but usually, to be honest, I don't think they give you enough victory points to be worth it. It's much more important that you get resources here, because the resources you will be able to use from the beginning. Once we start scoring your first card, you will only have the resources from the first card plus all the sanctuaries, because you don't have to flip around the sanctuaries. So if you can get sanctuaries, try to get them with resources so that when you get to the 2 handlers, this condition here, you actually have the 2 antlers available. Because look at this, now right now, I don't even have them. There are no antlers here. There's only 1 antler here. Yes, there's an antler here, but this card will be flipped around when we score this card. So as I said, always look at the cards that come up higher and at the sanctuaries. The rules encourage you to always increase the value of your cards, the regional cards that you have. You won't be able to do this all the time. Yes, it's good to do it because you can get sanctuaries, but you can't always increase because the high numbers, as you can see here with the 52 and the 60, they have rather complicated conditions so that you can even score them. It is highly unlikely that if you have this card at the end, that you can actually score it, because it's unlikely that you have all these resources. These resources would have to come from all the sanctuaries or this card by itself. In this case, as you can see, I would not be able to score this card because I only have 1 crystal and 1 antler. So I suggest that you should have maybe 2 or 3 cards that are really high numbers, but try to have one very early in the game, because if you have it early, then now you could also get resources from these cards here. Actually, in this case, that's not the case, but it's a random selection of cards that I put out. Put a high card early, and if you can get a high card scored towards the end, then you're very likely to win, because that's a lot of points that you get right there. And that's not very easy to do. So do not worry too much about only increasing the value of your cards, except that sometimes you actually have to go back from a 60 to an 11 and you don't get a sanctuary. That's fine. It may also be of value to have rather low cards at the very end of your row, because those usually have a bunch of different resources, and with these resources you can then fulfill the conditions of the cards that come earlier in the game or later in scoring. And it also is not unusual that within the first 2 scoring rounds you don't really get any points, because as you see here, again, this is a low number, the 4. It doesn't actually give you anything to score. but it gives me 2 resources that I can later use to maybe then actually fulfill this condition, which actually I do right now because I have these 3 crystals. And this is it. That's Faraway. I hope you enjoyed the video. And if you did, please subscribe below.